Okay, so good evening everybody. I'm very, very honored to be here. I don't know Raya so well yet, but I'm getting to know her. I've taken on to work a little bit for TAL, this incredible organization that I'm learning more and more about. And so in our meetings together, it came up and I said I would be happy to come and share some Torah. The Torah that we learned tonight and the spiritual expansion that takes place thereafter, there's chairs here, someone come down here. Should be an aliyah for the neshama of David ben Masuda. I want to tell you that when we learn, we dedicate our learning to the neshama of the person that we want to connect it to. But children don't need to do this. When I was 16, I had a very close friend who lost her mother in a tragic car accident, and I insisted on sitting shiva with her, which I didn't know was a problem at the time, but I didn't budge from the floor next to her. And one of the great rabbis of Jerusalem came to be Menachem Avelim. She was the oldest of 5 kids. We were 16, and he wanted to speak to her in private. And she said, "Ruthie's not leaving the room. You can speak to us both, or you don't have to speak to me." She said to him, real teenagers. And he said, "Okay, I'll speak to her with me there." And what I heard really, really helped me. I was so grateful to have been privy to that conversation, because it was very meaningful. He said to her, "Do you have any questions?" And she said, "Yes." She said, my main question is, my main question that's bothering me today is that my children will not know, my siblings, my baby siblings will not know their mother. That they won't remember, the 2-year-olds, the 4-year-olds, they won't remember who their mother was. And it's such a vivid part of their life to me, and that they won't know who she was is one of the most difficult things for me. That the connection seems to have severed, like now. And he said to her, "I want to tell you something." He said, when people want to dedicate a zchut or link what they're doing to the neshama of the person that's no longer here, then we say this verse, and we say that the neshama should have an aliyah, and we dedicate our learning to that person. But he said, children don't need to do this. He said, because you are their blood in this world. So he said, every time that sibling of yours kisses a mezuzah, the neshama of the parent gets an aliyah, gets an elevation, because they are their blood and flesh and bones in this world, right? And they're an extension of their soul. And that we know from the Torah that death isn't the end of life. That death is a transition into a different mode of life. So it's a very painful transition, because they're no longer here to live in a tangible way and experience our physical dimension of our world. But the link to children is eternal, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and they live on, not just in our memory and in our experiences that we shared, but in our deeds and in who we are. And what I know of Raya so far, and you can definitely all share this with me in a much more meaningful way if you know her for longer, and that is that so much of who she is and who you are and what you bring to your family and to the world is so clearly a carrying on of this incredible chain of the foundations that he laid. And that in the breaths that you take, and in the words that you say, and in the tefillot that you pray, his neshama is constantly elevated and lives on and expands through the real life that you bring to the world. So you are a living exponent of his soul, and I'm very, very proud to know you. And I feel that all of us, through coming here and consciously dedicating our learning, is a further aliyah for the soul, which wouldn't necessarily be. So because this person passed away, we're coming here tonight to learn. It's a tremendous elevation, tremendous aliyah for his neshama. I want to speak a little bit about prayer. Interesting that you spoke about brachot and the connection to Hashem. You didn't give me a topic for tonight, so I thought I'll just come and see and daven that Hashem should speak through me. And as I was driving here, and as I've been sitting here for a few minutes, I think that I have 6 topics here in front of me. So we're going to pick prayer, I think. And that is the element of prayer that is very little known. So the time of year that we're in at the moment, the time of year that we're in at the moment is a difficult time of year, for the Jewish people. I'll just stand up, you can see me at the back. But it's one of the most difficult elements of this time of year for me at the moment is the difficulty to connect to this time of year. Thank God, what we're struggling with at the moment is a difficulty to connect to the pain of Jewish history. Thank God that we're frustrated that we can't go swimming in the 9 days. Thank God, right, that at the moment we're living in a zone, in an era of, even though there is terrible tragedy all around us and terrible pain of the galut, as a nation, on the most part, we're not doing too badly in terms of safety and comfort in the world. And this wasn't always the case in Jewish history. And because the Torah concept of time is not linear, we don't move through time and commemorate an event that happened years and years ago as an anniversary, right? Or a birthday that says, oh, once upon a time, this day I was born. Or once upon a time, this year I got married. So let's have a party and remember that. That's not the Jewish concept of time. Jewish concept of time is cyclical, is a cycle where you revisit that energy in time when you return to that place every year, right? Rabbi Tauber put it this way. He said that if time was linear, then a birthday should really be a very tragic day. Because if you're moving from your birthday till the end of your life, then every year you're getting further away from your birthday. It's a very depressing day. So someone said, yeah, that's why we have a party, to forget it, to drown out the misery. But he said, no, it's a happy day in Judaism. It's a happy day. It's the day to be celebrated in Judaism. You know why? Not because you're moving further away from your birthday, but because you're revisiting the energy and time that was present on that day. On that day, your soul was granted life. There's a tremendous outpouring of love and benevolence and generosity and compassion from God to your neshama, not because of something you did, not because of something you deserved or you earned, but just from pure giving you an opportunity to manifest as a body and a soul combined in this world. That is revisited every single year, and you celebrate it because it's a special, very auspicious time to pray, it says, because you've got a benevolence, a connection with Hashem that day that revisits every year. So this time in Jewish history is the darkest time in Jewish history, and it's a time where really we mourn all the tragedies of Jewish history. We mourn them now, even if they happened at different times of the year. Although the big colossal ones that represent all our pain actually happen at this time of year now as well. So it's a time of danger. It's not a time of joy. And the Mefarshim, the sources that talk about the customs this time of year, say that we do the mitzvot that we do begeder chinuch, which means we do most of the commandments that we keep today, we keep as a means of education. What does this mean? So really we should keep the laws of mourning because we're so sad that we can't bear to think about going on holiday right now. But we don't feel that way. We're desensitized, and because we're living in a relatively safe zone in history, it feels more like the summer holidays than it does like a period of mourning. Are you following me? Yeah. So the question is, how do we connect to the mourning? And how do the laws help us, right? It feels very fake. It's like, can't do laundry, can't go shopping, I can't go swimming. It's more annoying than doing these things. Laundry for children under 5 is okay. Some say under 7, some say under bar mitzvah if they need the laundry. But it means to wear freshly laundered clothes, or your clothes straight out of the dry cleaners. Shouldn't wear them fresh. Should wear clothes that you wore yesterday. We should lay them on the floor, not a filthy floor. You should lay your clothes on the floor first and step over them in your socks, not with dirt, not with muddy shoes, but just that they shouldn't be the fresh feeling of, right? Indulgent showers are a problem. You should have a shower to get clean with water slightly colder than usual, because it's a period of mourning. Only this week we're talking about the 9 days leading up to Tisha B'Av. Sfaradim only keep the Shavua Shechalbo, which means the week of Tisha B'Av, and there are such laws. So why do we keep them if we don't feel that way? If we don't feel that way, we should act the way we feel, and that would be more honest. And we should aspire to get to a place of, we should learn about the destruction, or we should try and connect emotionally and spiritually to what's going on. But to do something that is going to breed more of a frustration or annoyance from us rather than connect us, it's not an expression of how we feel. So why are we doing it? So the Torah says, no, you fake it until you make it. You do a mitzvah to be me'orer the pnimiyut. You do a mitzvah. The mitzvah that you're doing by abstaining from the things that we abstain from, like no drinking wine and no eating meat in this week, we do it to elicit, to arouse an experience that we're saying we wish that we will grow into, this being a true reflection of how we feel. The external awakens the internal. It says that after the actions, the hearts are drawn. When you do something, it encourages you to work towards actually feeling that way, even though we don't feel it necessarily now. And so Judaism is very pro hypocrisy. Really, Judaism is pro hypocrisy. This means that it's okay to be hypocritical if you're moving in an upward trend. If you say, I'd rather be honest, I'd rather be consistent. So someone says to you, you know, I don't know, we have these Lashon Hara hours where we keep an hour a day where we don't speak Lashon Hara. So on your fridge, you pick 1 hour in your day, because it's impossible for me to do it on a daily basis and consistently. But I just realized that I've stood up and the video is maybe videoing my shoulder. Will you just see? You guys can see me? Okay. So when you take on to say, I'm going to work on myself, and 1 hour a day, I won't speak Lashon Hara. So your friend calls you and there's something you've been really waiting to hear. And she's got this news and it's absolutely not relevant to anything in your life and is clearly Lashon Hara. And she calls you and it's like, it's 10:15 and 10 till 11 is your Lashon Hara hour. So you're like, I'm going to call you back at 11, right? And you hang up the phone. And so you might say, well, that's so inconsistent. That's so hypocritical. If you're going to speak Lashon Hara, right, at 11, what's the difference? What the heck? Just be like, you know, what are you doing? That's so hypocritical. Or people that come and speak to me, they say they're struggling, they would like to keep Shabbat, but it's impossible for them to keep the whole 25 hours of Shabbat. It's impossible. It's not in their ballpark. It's not in their zone. So what do we say? We say keep Friday night. Keep Friday night. Switch off your phone before you light your Shabbat candles, and until the morning, keep Shabbat. And on Saturday, you must go shopping. Get in your car, go. Do not keep Shabbat on Saturday day. And he said, but that's so hypocritical. That's so inconsistent. If I'm keeping Shabbat, I'm keeping Shabbat. If I'm not keeping Shabbat, I'm not keeping Shabbat. So what do we say? It's okay to be inconsistent if you're moving upwards in the spiral. What happens when you don't speak Lashon Hara from 10 till 11 and then you call her back and you hear all the garbage that you shouldn't hear? You've built your self-control muscle. You've flexed that part of yourself that holds back. There's a chair here as well. You've held back and you've built that dimension of your soul for that hour. And in a month, you know what will happen? You'll feel ready to not speak Lashon Hara or not listen to Lashon Hara from 10 until 12. And then a month later, it will be from 10 until 1. Do you see this? But if you don't start somewhere, you'll never get there at all. If you keep Friday night, then after a month or two, you'll be like, actually, this is doable. I'm going to do Shabbat morning too and go shopping in the afternoon. Do you see where I'm going with this? Okay. This is the Torah perspective. You say, do it even if it's inconsistent. Do it even if it's not possible to maintain on a daily or regular basis, because it's building that muscle. It's building that muscle. It's building part of yourself that will now expand. And that strength doesn't leave you. There's no delete in the brain. I tell my kids about watching stuff when they want to watch things. And they say, you know, what's the big deal? I'll watch this. I said, there's no delete on the brain. You can't press delete and remove it. Imagery sticks with you forever, and your actions impact you forever. You do a good act one time as a one-off, even if you can't maintain it, it builds that spirituality muscle in you and made you that bit bigger. And so we keep the laws this time of year, even if we don't feel the morning, and even if we don't connect to what it means that we don't have a Beit HaMikdash, and we don't have, right, the Kohanim, and we don't live in Jerusalem, and we don't connect to it. We keep it to encourage a feeling. By the way, in education, they say today that this is the only way to get through to children. That you can't say to a child the reality of where it is that they are. You have to build based on the future of where they could be. So if you say to a child, you're a good-for-nothing lowlife, the chances that that child will ever amount to something are very small. Even if it's true. If you carry on like this, you will not amount to anything. You're a loser. You're a nobody. Right? How could you do that? How could you act like that? How could you speak like that? Whatever it is crushing for the child. But what's much, much more beneficial for growing and expanding, right, the personality of someone who you're influencing, is to speak to them now based on who they could become. You know how amazing you are at that? This is what you could build from it. You find something positive and you build that, you fan that to a flame. It's called the approach of Gadlut Adam, the greatness of man, where through building ourselves up, we expand, as opposed to, in families, we see this a lot, thank God. And one of the strongest arteries of personality in yourself that was developed by your family, the family members or the people that loved you, was through the love itself. The people who spurred you on to the greatest heights in your life were people that loved you unconditionally, not based on your achievements. Think about it. People who believed in your innate capability, not who said, you better or else. You better make this great or else. Those experiences might have spurred you on to greatness, but not innate greatness. It didn't build your self-confidence. It didn't build your self-esteem. It didn't build your belief in yourself. The people who really made you expand intellectually, but mainly I'm talking about emotionally and spiritually, were people who built you from within, who said, you are who you are, and I'm committed to that, and I believe in that greatness, in your essential self. Unconditional love. And that's the greatest gift really we can give our children. And in relationships, that's the greatest gift you can give to anybody, is to say, I believe in your abilities and your capabilities and the capacity of the greatness of your soul. You speak to the soul of the person, which is infinite in its capacity and potential. And that really turns up the volume of them feeling like I can live up to that. I want to make you proud. I want to do you proud. I want to live up to your expectations of self. We feel as parents very critical, and as women are wired to be very critical. Our wiring is to see the half empty, because we're there to build the world. So you're supposed to see what needs to be fixed in yourself. But the error that we make very often is to say, well, if I don't knock him into shape, how will he ever amount to anything? If I don't tell her where it's at, then but it's not true. The opposite is true. If we can forego and bypass the negativity and fan to a flame the positive, they're much more likely to discard the negativity in themselves and live up to the positive that we see in them. And that is an encouraging, based on future, based on potential, based on the compassion now because of what they could be. It's called to be erech hapayim, or to have God's midah, rachamim, which means mercy. Even though now your actions don't justify this kindness, but based on what you could build, if I hold on a little bit longer and believe in you, then that is the midah of rachamim. So that is one thing that I wanted to speak about tonight, and that is that we are doing things to encourage us to feel a certain way. That we fake it, we build a picture, we do actions on the outside to encourage a feeling, even though we're not there yet. That is number one. Number two is the second thing I wanted to speak about was how to connect, nonetheless, emotionally to what it is that we're going through. If I will never ever appreciate what we're missing by the fact that we've lost a temple, how am I supposed to mourn the destruction of the temple? And I'm not to blame. I wasn't born in the era of the temple, and I can't relate to it, and sacrifices are meaningless to me. If anything, they seem barbaric. How can I say I wish that Mashiach would come and we'd all go back to Yerushalayim? I don't actually know how to cope with avocado. I mean, Jerusalem's very nice, but there's no online shopping there. Amazon hasn't even hit Israel yet properly. How are we gonna, Mashiach, very nice, but how do I relate to it from within me? So the sources say like this. They say that when a person leaves this world, they're asked 3 questions. And one of the questions that a person is asked, their soul is asked when they leave the world, is, did you yearn for redemption? Did you long for Mashiach? So it's not just a time of year thing. It's something that we're supposed to be striving for our whole lives. How can we say, and how can we be measured or judged by the fact that we yearn for Mashiach or didn't yearn for Mashiach? So the answer is like this. The commentary says, the sources that speak about it in the Amida, actually, we say that we long for the return of Jerusalem as Tzemach David Abdecha, you should bring Mashiach. So the commentary say, how are we supposed to connect to this? They say that we have to realize that the exile and the place that we're at today, and all the tragedies and all the traumas and all the difficulties and all the struggles and all the darkness, is all an outgrowth. It's all a ripple effect of the exile. So to say, I wish I wasn't here because I wish I had the Beit HaMikdash, is lying through your teeth. That's not called longing for redemption. Longing for redemption is when I come up against a brick wall of my own block, or in my relationship I struggle,
or in, God forbid, health or tragedy or traumas or illness or death, God forbid, premature death, for example, right, comes to the world, we say, oh, Golos. Because if Mashiach would be here, that wouldn't happen. Perfection and completion would be our experience if Mashiach was here. So to say, well, that's part of reality, we have blocks, that's part of reality, we have difficulties in our relationships, that's part of reality, there's mental health issues. No, it's not part of reality. It's not supposed to be. Connect your pain to the pain, the cosmic pain, the macro pain of the exile. The way to connect to God is from within the self. And this brings us to prayer. You know, we say, God, I'm going to connect to God. So some people are naturally more spiritual, and so they have an easier time with prayer. But what about the people who are not naturally more spiritual, don't feel God in their life? So the sources say that really to connect to Hashem is impossible from outside of yourself. No big hand is ever going to tap you on the shoulder and you turn around and be like, Hashem is there. God's like, hi honey, you know, this is what I want from you in your life. I'm here for you. You'll never ever feel that. You'll never ever feel, I mean, if you do, you need to see as a professional. It's a problem, right? You hear voices or you see images or you feel a hand on your shoulder and it's God. It's very problematic psychologically, right? That's not normal. So how are you supposed to relate to Hashem? You will never have a conversation. It always feels like a monologue. It's not a dialogue. He won't answer you back verbally. You won't hear him with your ears. You won't see him with your eyes. Him, it, the force, the universe, the power, whatever you want to call it, God. So how are you supposed to relate to Hashem? How are you supposed to relate to Hashem and cultivate a faith that still goes back, that still believes, that still has faith, that still prays? It's very hard. Very, very hard. So like you're supposed to only experience the exile from within your own exiles, there is nobody in this world that doesn't feel or experience in their life, or there's someone in the immediate family circle or friendship circle, some real form of pain. And the Torah says from that place we can experience the experience of the exile. So too our experience of godliness. Says Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, to experience God, you need to connect to the God inside of you, and prayer is the God inside of you connecting to the God outside of you. Okay, you have to be very careful how you understand this. But we understand it from the word of tefillah. One of the words in prayer that we use for Hashem is ani, anochi. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, ani, anochi, I. But ani is the word that we use to also mean me. And that's one of God's names. One of God's holy names is I. Huh? God, not I. But God's name is I. Anochi, not just when I speak about myself. Not just when God's referring to himself, he says I. One of God's names is Ani. Hillel HaZaken. Hillel was one of the humblest people who ever lived. He arrived in the Beit HaMikdash and he said, Im ani kan hakol kan. He said, if I am here, everything's here. And he was one of the most humble people who ever lived. After Moshe, he was probably the most humble person who ever lived. And he was not saying, okay guys, I've arrived, the party can start. He said, if I am here, everything is here. If I am here, he was using Hashem's name. He said, if the Hashem of the world is here, then everything is here. So why did he choose to use that name? Because our deepest access to godliness is through our own essential self. If you want to find Hashem, you have to find yourself. The place that you find God, you know where they say there's no atheist, no foxhole? Because fear unlocks the das. Fear, real fear, unlocks the essential elemental self. And in that place, you're connected to God. If you've ever felt abject terror, you're like, please God, don't let me die. Even if you're a sworn atheist. In the essential, right? Fear, pain also does that. Pain takes us to a place of, God, why? And any very deep experience or emotion takes you to a very, very essential element of self. And in that place, you know Hashem. So to go inwards is to go upwards. To find the essential elemental, real essential self is the experience of prayer. We have a hard time with this because we, in our culture and in the civilized world, we equate visibility with power. We equate visibility with power. Someone who's very powerful is very visible. They're in the media, they're on the news, you know what they look like, you've heard them speak. And that's what makes a powerful person. The more visible they are, the more they're known, right? The more powerful they are. The more powerful they are, the more visible they are. But with God, it's exactly opposite. You can go into your room, you can close your door, you can whisper, you can think, and He hears you. And that's the greatness. That's the greatness of God. That it's not something external to you, because if you can see it or you can hear it, by definition, it's outside of you. You have a relationship with something that's outside of you, then it's not part of you. Are you hearing me? It's got to be something tangible in the finite dimension of the physical world. But when you can close your eyes and you can think or you can whisper and you can feel and you connect to Hashem from that place, it's because He's not physical. And that's His power. That's the power of God. So how do we go there? How do we go there? How do we connect? Oh, can I go to 1:30? How do we go there? How do we connect to this part of ourselves where we know Hashem very deeply? We learn it from the Amidah. We can learn it from many places, but we learn it from the Amidah service, from the first bracha of Shmona Esrei, which is really a reflection of a lot of our prayers. In prayer, very often, we call on the merits of the fathers. You familiar with this? We say, Hashem, in the merit of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, in the merit of Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, in the merit of our holy forefathers, please grant me X. So in today's world, it's called protectia, or name dropping, where we say, do you know who I am? I'm the great-great-granddaughter of your very, very good friend. So please grant me X, right? Or like they say today, it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? What gets you places in life is your connections. So we say, is it fair? Is it fair that some ripped jeans, down and out teenager should go up to this elitist club and they take one look at him and they're about to close the door and he wedges his toe in the door and he says, I'm Bob Smith. And they say, Bob Smith? Any relation to Ian Smith? It's like, yeah, I'm his grandson. Ian Smith founded the club. They don't shut him out. What do? They open the door wide and they let him into the fanciest lounge and they bring him a whiskey. Because Ian Smith founded the club. So did he do anything to deserve it? Does he have the right number of digits in his salary to earn to be a member of this club? No. Is it fair? Is that fair? How do you feel when you see someone who's made it, not because of their own merits, but because they have connections? You feel good for them. If you're Raya, you feel good for them. I feel it's not fair. Why can't I have those connections? Yeah? You hear me? Normal people out there, not Raya? Yes? It's not fair. So we say, well, life's like that. We say in South Africa, right? Life's like that. That's what life's about. It's not fair, but that's the reality that we live in. That's the reality. But in Hashem's world, who is the master of justice, who is Emet itself, why does it pull any strings? Why does it carry any weight when I can say, God, in the merit of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, please grant me X? I know I'm a great, and I'm far, far removed from who they were, but they were unbelievably great, and they were up there in your good books, and so please grant me this in their merit. It's not fair. And the question's stronger, says Rav Dessler, that he says that in Hashem's Torah it says, Lo tateh mishpat ve'lo tikach shochad. Do not take bribes. Don't take any kind of bribery. And we're told in the Torah, Hashem keeps His Torah. He is the master of justice. So if we say, okay, so fallible human nature, frail human psyches, so we're influenced by connections. But God, and in God's Torah it says, don't pervert justice. Don't pervert justice and don't be swayed by bribes. Don't let someone get in there based on getting in there. They've got to make it on their own merit. So how does it work? How can it work? What are we possibly trying to achieve by saying, I'm their great-great-grandchild? Question number 3. We're not going to get to answer this one tonight, but it's you can look it up in Strive for Truth. Rav Dessler talks about it in an essay called Zechut Avot, which means the merits of the fathers. He says there's a third question, and that is, how come God, who is the master of justice, can sometimes treat somebody with harsh justice, harsh judgment, and sometimes can treat somebody with rachamim, which means mercy? How can they both be true? Isn't mercy a perversion of justice? He says. if it's not what's coming to the person, how can it be fair to treat this person with compassion and kindness? And question number 4 is, it says that there's sometimes a situation in life where there's something called tamas chut avot, where there's no longer the merits of the fathers for this person or a generation. It could be a person, an individual, a town, or a generation, where there is no longer the merits of the fathers. How does that work? Either you're linked to the merits of the fathers or you're not. How can there be a situation where this no longer works for you, where you cannot get the benefit, so to speak, of being related to these people? How does that work? So we have to explain it, Keseda. Again, I'm going to go through it very quickly. Can't really do it justice in 10 minutes, but I'm going to try. Try and stay with me carefully. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. It says, Asara dorot min Noach ve'ad Avraham. There are 10 generations from Noach to Abraham. The very next Mishnah says, Asara nisyonot nitnasa Avraham Avinu. 10 tests was tested Abraham our father. So the question's asked, why, when you're telling me that there are 10 generations from Noach to Abraham, you just call him plain old simple Abraham? And when you tell me that there were 10 tests that Abraham was tested, we call him Avraham Avinu. 10 tests was tested Avraham Avinu. It says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, I think it's Rav Chaim Shmulevitz or Rav Chaim Vitalis, I don't remember. It says an amazing thing. I think it's Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. He says, Ma she'atzadik tarach ve'yagea ve'amal lehasig, ashrei banav acharav. What a tzaddik, what a righteous individual, worked hard and toiled to generate and shift and create, worthy, or he says, ashrei, lucky, what? Praised? Not praised.
And this one is more lucky.
Lucky or praised. Ashrei banav acharav. How, oh, there's a word I'm looking for. Anyway, say again. What do you say? Fortunate. Thank you. Fortunate are his children after him. Right? That's what the Rav Chaim Shmulevitz writes. He says, when a person works hard to achieve something himself, how fortunate are his children after him. What does he mean? So it says that, Rav Miller explained this to us like this. He said that there is something called spiritual genes. Just like you get physical genetics from your parent, and if you work in education, sometimes you see it's not just physical genetics. Sometimes I go to parents' evening and I meet the parents, and then you're like, that's why this child doesn't stop talking, or that's why the child, right? You put 2 and 2 together when you meet the parents very often. You see that they bequeath to their child not just their brown eyes or their hair, but also a personality, right? Personality. There's something called spiritual genetics. Spiritual genetics are such that if a person works very hard on themselves and changes their midot, changes their innate characteristics. Let's say you do this. Rabbi Miller used to say, people come to me when they have their first child and they say to me, teach me about childhood education. He says, you know what I tell them? I tell them they're too late. Because if you really want to help your child, you'll start when you're bat mitzvah, and you'll work on your base animalistic characteristics, your lust and your drives and your desires and your anger and your problems and your personality, so that by the time you have a first child, you are now, let's say you were an angry person, you're now perfected that midah, and now you're a chilled, cool, calm, collected individual. Your child is born without that anger. And that is weird, because it doesn't happen with nose jobs. Your kid's born with your original nose. You can have as much plastic surgery as you like, but character development runs deep. And when you change and shift a characteristic of yours, your child is born without it. Amazing thing. Spiritual genetics, he says. When you work and shift something, you bequeath that to your children. And that's what it means. How fortunate are his children after him. When it's telling you that there were 10 generations from Noach to Abraham, it's telling you a fact. There were 10 generations. This was his name, this was his name. Between them, there were 10 generations. But when it's telling you that Abraham struggled and passed 10 tests, then it tells you that by doing so, he became Avraham Avinu. He ingrained into his psyche a shift that ran so deep, a change that was so transformative, that this now molded and shifted and transformed his genes, so that everybody born of this line afterwards will have these innate characteristics. And Rabbi Miller spoke for a whole hour. Rabbi Miller was my Rebbe in Gates at Seminary. He taught this to us. He spoke for a whole hour about the 10 tests of Abraham and how ingrained in the Jewish genetics, in our psyche, are these things that Abraham worked hard to achieve. For example, He said, when Hashem said to Abraham, one of the first tests, the second test was Lech Lecha. Go to yourself, right? Go to the land of Israel. And Abraham, with tremendous self-sacrifice, left his home, left his birthplace, left his family, uprooted and took very little with him and went and followed God blindly to Israel. He carved into his genetics, he forged a connection with the land of Israel that runs in our blood till today. People make aliyah who don't speak the language, who don't get the culture, who are brought up their whole lives, are 10th generation Americans. And they leave it all and they go to Israel. What on earth? You never find a 10th generation Irishman going back to America because his ancestry is from there. And he feels a connection to the Americans. That's just not normal. It's not normal. People from all walks of life who've never been to the kotel, who don't speak the language, who don't even believe in anything spiritual, feel something. They come to the land and they feel a connection to the land. And they make aliyah. It's a phenomenon throughout history. Where's that from? Abraham Avinu. Abraham Avinu, Abraham, our father. It's called spiritual genetics. When you work and toil to achieve something, your child is born on a higher level in their point of free choice. There's a whole topic here we could go into on free choice. Free choice is very real and very individual. But where your point of free choice is nothing to do with your free choice. You didn't choose where you were born on the ladder. That's your parents' business. Where your parents, right, are when you're born, that's where you're born on the ladder. And then you're not held accountable for that. It's not your fault where you were born, which culture, which civilization, which era in history, which family you're born in. You had no free choice about that. What you have free choice about is what you do with what you were given. How far you move and in which direction. That's called, right, what you're held accountable for in your life. But where you're born is due to your parents. Says Rabbi Miller from Rav Dessler. He says Abraham, through carving into his spiritual psyche, the matriarchs and the patriarchs, created a shift that was so deep, that ran so strong. You know, I often marveled, I'm studying femininity a lot, Jewish femininity at the moment, and I find it so fascinating that there were phenomenally great women in Jewish history, but only 4 of them made it into matriarch caliber, and only 3 men made it into Av, into Abba, to father, full father caliber. What sets them apart? There were so many great women in history. We learn about them. They're in the Tanakh. They're in the Bible as well. Amazing, amazing people. But there was something categorically different about the matriarchs and the patriarchs. And you know how I see it? I see it like the primary colors. They were the primary colors. There were amazing people who lived afterwards, but they were purple, pink, cerise, aquamarine, right? Mauve, violet. They were the combinations, and it says, and it's an amazing thing to trace, when you look at all the great women in Jewish history, and you see who they came from. They were often a combination of a Leah and Rachel, or of a Leah and Sarah, or of Rivka and, right? They were taking this to a whole new level in themselves, but they were basing it, they were finding it in themselves based on their own spiritual genetics. And the people who forged that path and who set the stage and who started the process were the imahot and the avot. They were the people who carved such a shift in their genetics that runs throughout history till today. In fact, the sources say that every single person is individual and different, and what you can bring to the world is something so unique and different, right? Based on your spiritual genetics. So we're not supposed to be clones of each other. There were great women in Jewish history, and you're supposed to make your mark in Jewish history too. You're supposed to make your mark in history as this amazing new flavor, new combination of the arteries, the spiritual genetics that run in our blood. So he says like this, and I'll just finish off with this. He says, Zechut Avot, you can read as the merits of the fathers, or you could put a patach, a line under the zayin to make it read the same letters. You can read Zakut Avot, which means the refinements of the forefathers. What we do in tefillah with name dropping isn't to say, Hashem, in his merit, please grant me X. God doesn't need reminding where I come from. He doesn't need reminding of my lineage or my heritage. I need reminding. When I say Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avoteinu, my God and the God of my forefathers, it's actually chronologically wrong. I should say my forefathers' God and my God. But based on their merit alone, you get nothing, says Hashem. You got to make a connection with God that's unique and individual to you. Elokeinu, my God. And then we say, and the God of my forefathers. You know who I am? You know where I come from? Not you know, of course he knows. We're reminding ourselves. We're reminding ourselves, we're going deep into our roots and saying, this is where I originate from. This is what I'm capable of. This is the home that I come from. And he finishes with a mashal, an allegory. He says you're sitting in a courtroom and you're watching two criminals being judged. Criminal A and criminal B. And criminal A and criminal B both committed the same crime. A bad crime. And you watch the court case, the final judgment, and the judge sentences criminal A to absolutely acquitted. He's acquitted. He's sent home. Nothing. Same crime. Criminal A gets sent home, and criminal B gets sent to a prison with a very rigorous rehab schedule. And you look at them and you say, these two criminals are the same. That's not fair. It's really not fair. And you're bothered and disturbed by it. You go up to the judge afterwards and you say, I have to see the case studies. I have to see these cases. I have to study. I don't understand why this is happening. I think there must have been a terrible mistake here. It's the same crime. And he says, no, you don't understand. Criminal A comes from an amazing home. Criminal A had the best upbringing with the most amazing opportunities in front of him. He got into a bad crowd 6 months ago. A really bad crowd, and he deteriorated so fast. And he was totally influenced by his surroundings, and he ended up committing this crime. And his parents are devastated, and he's just caught himself, and he's found what he's done, and he's totally shaken up. And they've got him a psychiatrist, and he's enrolled in lots of therapy, and we're sending him home. We're going to keep tabs on him. The police are on top of it, and we can keep tabs on him, but this is going to reform him, right, in no time at all. He's caught himself, he's totally changed tracks, and he's going to be okay. Criminal B comes from a down and out home in the slums, and if he goes home, he's going to be criticized for getting caught. There's no hope in sending him home. The only hope for him finding the straight and narrow is by sending him through a rigorous process of punishment and rehab, right, to help him reform his character. Criminal A and criminal B. That is what we're doing. When we say we're dropping the names, we're listing the heritage of our forefathers, we're trying to bring that to our credit. It's not for Hashem, it's for us. We're saying, Hashem, please send me home. Do you know who I am? Do you know where I come from? I'm a daughter of these people. And we're trying to find these strands of the purity and the sensitivity and the refinement of the forefathers and what they stood for in ourselves. And that's what he says is the merciful basis of judgment. Sometimes you can have -2, you can have +2. They're both true answers to the equation. You can have the equation in minus, you can have the equation in plus. And both are emet, both are true. So that's when sometimes there's a merciful basis of justice in Hashem. You answer the fourth question. How could there be sometimes a situation where a person is no longer meriting the merits of the fathers? Where you no longer deserve to be judged based on being related to these people? How does that work? I'm always related to them. How come there can be a situation where it doesn't stand to my credit? If I've caked my soul with so many layers of muck, if I've had so much plastic surgery that I no longer resemble my ancestry at all, are you following me? There's no relationship. I've severed the ties with my heritage so fully and completely that I'm not going to be able to receive any kind of merit from being related to them because I'm not. Do you see this? If I say this is what I stand for, I'm going to find in myself a strand of connection. I'm related to them because deep in my soul burns a flame of faith, or deep in my soul burns a flame of connection to, right? To chesed, which was Abraham, or to self-control, which was Isaac, or to truth, which was Jacob, and what they Mahot stood for. Then I deserve to be connected to their credit because, right? Not because I'm related, but because I'm connecting to the refinement in my soul. And that is what we're doing by saying to the merits of the fathers. We connect to all of Jewish history because we are Jewish history. We're at the tail end of Jewish history. When we rise, the whole of Jewish history rises with us. When we fall, the whole of Jewish history falls with us. Who is Jewishness? Who are the Jews if not us? In every generation, right, to say the Jews will live on. Who is the Jews? Us, me, you. We are all this limb of Jewish history moving through Jewish history. And by connecting to our ancestry and connecting to our innermost self, we find our heritage most deeply, we find our connection to ourself most deeply, and we find Hashem the most deeply. Thank you very much for listening. Laila Tov.